we calling Michael Politis, or just want me to get started? I don't want him.
I'll just text him.
Yeah, I know. And you want a what, 3x4?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in a minute.
Welcome to the front door. Richard, and Becky, you heard me. When the meeting starts, you'll need to push.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
We turned it off.
It's off, but when the meeting starts, you'll push the button.
You like that?
But we're still at the front door. Sorry I'm late. They would hear everything we need going on.
Okay, if everyone now wants to push their mics and turn it on.
Go ahead and turn your microphone on. Stay off it.
So Vice Mayor, going forward, the mics will be off till we push the button. Let's call the meeting to order. Sherry, can you take a roll, please?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Vice Mayor Politis,
Here.
Councilmember Bryan,
Here.
Councilmember Economos,
He's not going to be. Oh, he's okay.
Councilmember Lindau.
Present.
Just to let everyone know, Councilman Economos is on his way into the meeting, and he will be on mute and able to hear everything we say until he does arrive today. So the purpose of this meeting today was, as everyone knows, the biggest issue in the shores right now, and the numerous questions we're getting from the press, from our residents, everyone we run into, is what's happening with Ian, what's happening with Nicole, where is their money. So city manager and I sat down and made up bullet points that we also discussed with Representative Leak last Friday. We had a long discussion with him prior to the special legislative session on December 12th. But first of all, I want to go back to an ordinance 2020-08, and Becky will summarize what this ordinance is about. But I know that everyone is reaching out, residents are reaching out to whichever members of the commission, including myself, they can get a hold of. But be aware, when I have on a mayor's shirt, when I pass out my card, when I say anything about the city, I'm representing the city. And according to this ordinance, 2020-08, we cannot do that without the consensus of the commission. So we're going to get together today and figure out, who's going to represent the city, who's going to be the spokesperson. So at this time, Attorney Bose, will you explain to us what this ordinance was that we did back in 2020?
Yes, this was an ordinance that was passed to clarify how city council members or the mayor could communicate with third parties who are not members of city staff, for instance, about issues, because an issue had come up that there was some question whether a city council member, when they communicated with, let's say, the county, another city, a group of homeowners, whatever, whether they were actually setting forth the position of the city, or whether they were setting forth their own personal decisions. And so this ordinance was passed to make it clear that unless the mayor or city council member is affirmatively authorized to represent the city on something, that they can't. And if there's a proviso at the beginning, because we do not stop anybody from talking with people, But we do have, towards the end, that is, if the mayor or any city council member is communicating without the specific authorization of the city council, then that person, the mayor or the city council member, must specifically disclose that his or her opinions expressed are solely his/her personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the city or the city council. And I know that each of you received your new cards as commissioners tonight, and you'll use those, obviously, with people you run into, you meet at meetings, whatever. But you need to be careful if you have not been authorized by the city council to specifically state something for the council. You can say whatever you want to say, but you also have to say, look, this is my personal opinion, and it does not reflect the opinion of the city council.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so next we'll go over all of the items that we talked to Representative Leake about. And it's not only Representative Leake, we've had Congressman Waltz out here, Senator Wright. Just past Saturday, we Chase Tremont, our newly elected representative, went out with Chief Fowler. So there's a lot of eyes on this, and we just want to make sure that we have a concise message and that only one person is speaking on behalf of the council. Now, reminder, staff can speak at any time. So, Kirk, can you go over some of the items that we went over with Tom Leake? The first being insurance costs. And remember, this was something that was going to be on the special session even before Ian and Nicole came about because of the rising costs. But it's doubly so now.
Yeah, and we talked with Representative Leake, and the big problem we have is our folks are getting hit 3 times with different things. So the first one being the cost of increasing insurance. And I'll give you a quick example of something I received last week from a gentleman at Ocean 6, and their insurance renewed on December 1st. Their last year's premium was basically $160,000. For basically the same coverage, this year it jumped to $900,000. I'm sorry, $650,000. And their deductible was $900,000 and jumped to $1.2 million. So it's about a 411% increase. So we mentioned this to Representative Leake, and he said, and we said, do we need to give you this example? He said, no, I have them from all the. Stand by, let's see.
May I have your attention, please?
Fire drill.
May I have your attention, please? There has been a fire reported in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
That's not a drill.
For whoever's online, we have a fire alarm going off. We'll be leaving the premise right now.
May I have your attention, please? There has been a fire reported in the building.
It should be good.
Okay.
We're back up live.
Are we live again?
Yes.
Thank you, Angie. I know we did that as a test just to see if it would really work.
It works.
Yeah, with a little hiccup in
So
it.
let me get back to that if I can. So yeah, the example of going from 160,000 to 655,000, almost 656,000, is a huge increase. And so they're well aware of it. That was the reason originally for the special session. And then we happened to have 2 hurricanes. So now they're adding hurricane,
Catastrophe, I think they're calling it.
yes, discussions. Some of the things that have been talked about, obviously, I think the city, and I don't want to put words into the council's mouth, but I think there's probably consensus to say something needs to be done with insurance. It's clear, and I think the state realizes that, but we're in support of making modifications to control insurance increases. Now, one thing I will relay that I've heard from a couple of the representatives is that it's going to take a cycle of these bills before the bills, the invoices will go back down. Because, for example, the one that I said that just renewed on December 1, that's going to be their premium for the year. But maybe by next December with these changes, they'll be able to experience a significantly reduced premium. But it will have to go through that cycle. So timing, some people may be lucky here and when their renewal date is, others may not.
So no immediate relief and no guarantee that there'll be relief. And this is a up and down, I mean, it's not just Volusia County, it's just not.
It's a statewide issue. It just happens that we're getting hit 3 times with, for most of our properties in the shores. The other 2 being seawalls are not insurable, and now the condos have to pay for that. And then we're all aware of Senate Bill 4D, which has a funding requirement, and we'll talk about those 2 things later on. So that's the 3 hammers in a row on our folks.
So before we go on, so let's talk about insurance costs. Again, with the Sunshine Law, none of us can talk, so this is a workshop with the benefit of being able to say whatever we want because it was a public meeting. So what's everyone's thoughts on the insurance costs? I mean, we're reaching out to the state legislator. Is there anything else that can be done?
I have a question, if you
Sure.
want. Did Tom Leak or anybody else give you any specifics about something they might actually do?
No specifics, but he did say there have already been bills crafted, so they will hit the ground running on the 12th with language, but I searched the web and found a few different things about litigation and reinsurance and how that's all structured and based on the current requirements in the state, but I have no specifics and none were offered at this time. But we'll see the bills probably on the 12th.
Well, just as another price point, because of the roofs, this was my premium prior to the hurricanes was $7,100. Yeah. So I can't even imagine what the renewal rate's gonna be.
Yes.
And one good thing that we have in our favor, that Tom Leak is now the head of the Appropriation Committee. So what a great thing for us that somebody from Volusia County is definitely going to be representing us on this. What other thoughts
So-
do we have on the insurance? City manager had another.
Well, I was going to jump onto the property tax rebates.
Okay. Is there any other questions or anything else we want to discuss on insurance at all? I mean, I'm sure we all have examples the same way that the city manager said, would you like us to send you this example? And Tom Leak said, no, I have plenty here. I've received a lot of them. So everyone's in the same boat on that.
Madam Mayor, and I'm not going to address the insurance costs because in the end of this meeting, is it our goal to have these items and maybe other items as Kurt or staff suggest in some type of letter format so that way we all have the same exact statement to make or email or send a letter? Is that what we're ultimately, that's what I thought we were gonna do?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
That is the goal, that before the 12th, we get our exact needs, and that's what Tom Lake asked for. What are your exact needs from your City of Daytona Beach Shores?
Yeah, okay.
And if the council, commission decides that, this commissioner number one is going to be the one to research this issue and be the leader of that topic, so that everybody stays on the same point, in confirmation with the ordinance that we just talked about. So the commission has to give direction to one person, or multiple if it so chooses, as I'm looking at the attorney as I say that. That if the mayor is going to be our spokesperson, the mayor needs to be our spokesperson, but we also need to give direction for that message as well.
Yeah, so these are our needs, but also we want to be sensitive to this ordinance that we came up with 2 years ago. So, and we can discuss that after we get all the issues out here, but good question.
So
Vice Mayor.
I want to get through them all because I think they're going to just bring up other talking points that the mayor and I didn't think of. So I left the number 8 there of other. So, Vice Mayor, you may have a thought that we didn't have on this list, but these are things that we talked about with Representative Leak. So there was a proposal, I'll jump into number 2 here, for what they originally was going to be they called it like property tax relief, where they were going to delay property tax payments. And now it's turning into a discussion on property tax rebates. And my concern is, how do you define who's eligible? If they say because the language was originally, if you were impacted by the hurricane. Well, that's every property in the shores. So if every property in the shores is impacted by the hurricane in one way or another, obviously it's mostly the coastal properties that were dramatically impacted, but you have Pappas Plaza, a few homes that lost roofs. But we have, how they define that could be a huge hit to the city budget if we have to rebate those as a city. Now, if the state wants to put their money behind the rebate, I'm all for that. But if we have to take that hit, I mean, basically half of our budget, if not more, is property taxes, and 80% of our taxes come from condominiums. We still have, I believe it's 12 buildings declared unsafe. This could be a huge dollar figure for us. But again, it boils down to, how do they declare eligibility for rebates?
Can you use Oceans 5 an example?
Yeah, so Oceans 5, we look at it from the outside and go, okay, Oceans 5 is fine. They're not one of the ones that lost their seawall. They weren't declared unsafe. But during Hurricane Ian, they apparently, from what I've been told, had failures of the sliding glass doors on floors 11 and 5. Well, that led to damage on multiple floors, and they've had the folks from ServPro in there since Hurricane Ian, working around the clock. And would they be eligible? Even though we don't see the damage, their seawall's fine, unlike some of the others that we're aware of. So how that decision is made is vital in terms of, if it's catastrophic loss, we might have 1 or 2 buildings. It may be, $100,000 is not a big deal. But if you start talking just impacted, we could be talking millions. Now we have an issue. So we're very interested in that. But again, I've been told by a couple different senators and state senators and state representatives, oh, we've got $20 billion in reserves, let's free up some of that money and make some things happen. If that's the case, personally, as a former finance director, I'm saying yes, let's do that. But I would like the commission's perspective on what message we would like to send, but I don't want to have the huge impact just to be borne by our city.
Sam? Yeah.
In my opinion, the state is better qualified to evaluate the damages and to fund the rebates. That's my personal opinion.
I think our position should be that we let the state reimburse or, fund any rebates.
If they want to declare rebates, they can put their money where their
Where their
mouth
mouth
is
is.
and do it type of statement.
Some diplomatic version of
Yeah,
that.
it's easy to give away other
I
people's.
won't put it that bluntly.
But again, the thing that we need to clarify, what is damage, what is,
And that's the big unknown.
And that's why I say I thought the state has people better qualified to evaluate the damage and to make the decision on the funding. Because otherwise, we would be getting claims for things that happened long before that, or we just aren't big enough city to evaluate tons and tons of these claims.
And that's the other questions that I have about who administers this claim program. Is it straight through the state, or is the county gonna handle that? Or is it each city all of a sudden has to come up with a program that we as a small city don't really have staff to do that type of program? And the assessment to certify that, yes, this was hurricane damage, we're not.
so it might be similar to folks applying for FEMA. I'm applying, but I have to send you my documentation
Yes.
of what happened, what was my damage, the dollar value. I'm imagining it would be a lot of documentation, but we have to hold firm with our state representatives saying, if it's your idea, we cannot take this burden on, this financial burden on.
And Madam Mayor, I think in the context of that letter that we're gonna try and put together all these PowerPoints, you just tell them, we don't have the ability to add additional staff to handle the evaluation process, the filter process, the selection process, and then how you're gonna apportion the monies. And number two, we don't have that money with which to fund those claims. The state is in a better position, both financially as well as with staff, to handle that issue. If they choose to propose that project, then you can take it on and handle it, and we're very appreciative. But that's, we're not in a position to subsidize that kind of loss. That's where the state and the federal government come in.
My thoughts exactly, Michael.
City manager, does the county get a portion of the property tax?
They're a separate taxing authority on the bill, so this would impact them as
That's
well.
what I was asking.
But a little bit differently, because they have such a large tax base that for them, it's not just the condos and those major dollars. You have South Daytona that I think had 800 or so homes that flooded. Port Orange, I believe, had 1,200. And those are numbers from Ian. I haven't heard from Nicole if there were additional. But all those, I'm assuming, would be eligible for some property tax rebates as well. So the county takes a hit, but in the grand scheme of things, again, it's a smaller portion of their overall tax base compared to ours, where 80% of ours are condos, and that's what primarily took the hit, especially on the seawall side.
All right, before we move on to number 3, what other questions do we have, or what other discussion do we want to have on issue 2?
Has there been enough discussion to produce a paragraph on this?
I believe we can.
Okay, do you want to go on to number 3?
Is grants for repairs. Now, we've heard and seen some press releases that they're going to talk, the state is going to fund some grants that, I don't know if this is, $10,000 grant or $100,000 grant, or what that is going to look like. A lot of our folks struggle because FEMA considers their properties to be businesses. We've talked about that before. FEMA considers a condominium a business. They're not eligible. The only thing they're eligible for is an SBA low-interest loan. So the state understands that and has said, not directly, we don't know what, I have no idea what this looks like yet, but other than a couple of press release type stories that I've read, there's just talk about doing some type of program. Again, we've got 20 billion in reserves. Let's do something. This is the time to help our people. So I'm hoping that is true. Again, I don't know what that will look like, but for our folks, anything that they could do towards seawall repair or replacement, I think we should have a paragraph in there that says we support any type of grant program, even if it's a matching grant program, that would allow them to do, 50/50 up to whatever type of grant program they offer. Any assistance for our folks. There are a lot of people hurting out there. We're getting emails daily about, I don't have the money to do it, and I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy. So we have a lot of folks that seem to be on fixed incomes.
Kurt, did we ever assess from one end of Daytona Beach Shores to the other? I mean, driving up and down, several times with the chief and with you, it seems like there's a very, very low number of walls that were not compromised at all. Outside of the Oceans and the Shores Hotel, I don't remember too many properties, so we're talking about numerous.
Oh, yeah, countless. At one point, I believe, and I'm gonna look over to Stuart and say, I believe we were monitoring over 120 properties at one point, if I remember the list correctly, for anywhere from minor to, we're afraid it's gonna collapse type of situations, and most of those were coastal.
So when we talk about it, there'll be a lot of grants needed.
Absolutely.
Can I address one of the concerns? Apparently, some people aren't aware of the fact that if they're homesteaded, they can have a lien against their property, but they cannot foreclose on that lien until they sell or die. Is that correct? That is the state law.
That is my understanding as well.
So I think that some of the people who might have a false fear that they're going to lose their property, if they're homesteaded, they are not going to lose their property.
And I'm going to look at the attorney.
Okay, that has to do with code enforcement liens. But that does not have to do with liens by a condo association against individual owners.
That's
You
not my,
have to pay your condo dues and assessments, otherwise you can lose it, even if it's homestead.
when I was president of the HOA, I was informed that it was not a fact, that the HOA cannot, you can file a lien, but you cannot foreclose on the lien.
Someone, can you check on that for us, please?
Yes, I definitely will. So people don't have to pay their dues?
Yeah, in essence, if they can't, but
Or
they're,
even if they can?
it's gonna-
They don't have to, it's
yeah,
separate.
but it's going to rack up the fees against the lien, and either when their kids inherit it when they die, they're gonna have to pay it, or if.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
You can check on that. We, no use debating it right now till we get the answer. So, but anyway, I wasn't aware of that either. Commissioner Bryan, did you have something you wanted to say as well?
With regard to that, are you thinking that the condo association is the only creditor that can get around that?
Can you
Oh,
talk into your
no,
mic?
What
the
about
only
the-
one that can't get around it is,
Commissioner Bryan, can you talk into your mic so everyone can hear? You're.
Code enforcement.
Okay.
yeah, code enforcement
Okay.
liens cannot be foreclosed upon, but somebody's mortgage can. And, I mean, I own a condo right now. I know that it's a requirement under my mortgage that I keep my homeowner's dues current. And I signed away any rights I had of saying I'm homestead when I signed the loan documents. So there may be something about the condo association liens, and I'll look at that, but there are other things. Let's say if somebody came in and had work done in their condo,
Mechanics
they
lien.
still have to, the mechanics lien, that can be foreclosed upon. People can't just not pay their bills.
Okay, well, you'll look into
Yeah,
it.
but I will, I definitely.
So this is a huge part, though, the repairs. What other things do we want to discuss among ourselves or pass on to when we get back to Councilman, to Representative Leak? Yes?
Yeah, while we're on repairs, you mentioned cost sharing, or you meant sharing by the property owners, not sharing by the city.
Correct, property
So
owners.
you need to make that clear.
Yes. So just for consensus, we're in support of any grants the state would like to provide for property owners to help fund matching or otherwise.
Not involved the city.
The state or the county.
Well, county, federal, I think we have been talking to county officials, state official, and federal officials. So whoever does want to help us with
Yes.
funding, we will take any money available.
And in this case, we're focused on state today because of this legislative session, but absolutely still talking with federal, state, and county officials in case there are ever any dollars that trickle through.
Can we CC the county on this?
Absolutely. So, the next thing is really an FDEP requirement, and that is, you've heard a lot about beach-compatible sand. So, the requirement still stands, and as of last Thursday, the DEP, one of the DEP folks said that is not going to change. But we're still petitioning them. They have relaxed it a little bit, and now they're saying they'll use clean sand that's not necessarily fully beach-compatible sand. But one of the things that I used an example when talking with Representative Leak, the big issue is behind the seawall. Once you fill it, it has to be filled with beach-compatible sand. And what we suggested was, well, can we make an exception and say that maybe 5 feet behind the seawall is beach-compatible sand, but 5 feet, in our case westerly, would be, or inland, can be less compatible sand.
Because
You know,
the
because
seawall would be the buffer there.
the seawall's the buffer, and behind that, you give 5 feet or even 10 feet of beach-compatible sand, but behind that sand, allow them to do something else.
They're anticipating the next storm, they just don't want it to jeopardize it.
And everyone knows here too, I'm sure you've talked to it's very hard to find any sand anymore. I mean, everything's being tapped. Any of the available sand has gone away, so it's getting harder and harder. And it was, when we were there Thursday night with the DEP there were several people, Stuart, you were one of them, that had bags of sand that said, this is the sand that I'm using, is this compatible? You know, so and the line to talk to the DEP was halfway across the community center.
So I've also heard, and I'd like to research this a little bit more before a letter, but I've heard that there are closed borrow pits in the state. And I think as part of this, I'm just throwing this out there, I'd like to ask the state to look at those and see if they can do an emergency opening on those to allow for immediate sand access. They'd have to test it and make sure it meets certain standards, all of that, but, you know, or if there are pits that are trying to open, to expedite the permitting for that as well. The closest pit to us is Flagler, and the next one is literally in the center of the state, and I'm not sure that one meets the quality of sand that we need it to be. The county had a couple listed, and the ones in the middle of the state said that it was good for masonry and cement sand, but it didn't say it was beach compatible. And Flagler, the one that's close, I've heard a rumor that they've been taking it and taking it and taking it, and the vein they're following is starting to become less compatible or less clean. So they're concerned that that one may dry up here shortly as well. Again, rumor, but it's possible. I mean, soils change.
Well, is it true that, I heard that it was up in the Panhandle, the closest place where we could really get it?
There is an open mine up there, but Flagler right now is the closest one. The other problem with the Flagler that I've been told is that the Army Corps of Engineers has access to that one as well, so they're reserving a bunch of the sand for Flagler.
Was there not one in Ocala at one time? Did you hear Ocala?
Yeah, center of the state area, Ocala area, but that's a long,
It's a long truck ride.
large gas bill on top of the cost of the sand.
And go into a little bit more, you know, you and I have been involved with it every day, but talk about how we heard it could be anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a load. And someone like, was it St. Kitts or Grand Coquina had hundreds of thousands of dollars in sand.
I've been told one hotel already spent about $200,000 on sand. And a lot of that washed away in this first storm. So, you know, these are big bills. We're not talking, you know, it doesn't sound like a whole lot when you say anywhere from $600 to $1,000 for a truckload. A couple $1,000, we're good to go. Well, that sand doesn't go very far. And what looks like a lot of sand when they dump one truck on the ground, when you start putting it in the hole, it's, you know, a drop in the bucket.
And then again, if they don't have the backup of either the bags or whatever they're gonna use, like you said, one bad storm, we saw that at
Hawaiian Inn, they dumped I don't know how many dollars worth of sand they dumped in.
Last
and
3 hours?
And it was gone. They did buy themselves some time. I mean, I think they may have saved their building, but that's, you know,
Well, in addition to,
expensive save.
in addition to the cost of the sand, you've got the fuel for the truck, you've got the labor. Yeah, so it's a big bill.
And the $600 quote that I had emailed to me was $600 plus a 37% fuel cost. So,
7% of the 600?
yes.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah, the people I've talked to say 600, but I assumed that was delivered. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm hearing lots of numbers, but that was just one of the emails I received that had it in writing, a number. So,
Maybe what we could do is, I assume the state has some say in the price. I don't know what kind of thing they can do, but maybe they could even negotiate a price, for example.
Right now is not a good time to be negotiating for that, though, probably.
yeah, probably a little late at this point.
Everybody's
Yeah.
looking for the same thing, so.
And on top of that too, there was talk at the beginning that, remember, one of the locations put in a lot of coquina rock that seemed to hold up pretty well. Where are
Yeah.
they at on putting those large coquina rocks?
So, that is also a problem with, so first thing, it's expensive. So that was white surf, and it's very expensive to do coquina rock. I've also heard that the coquina source is drying up, and that the Army Corps of Engineers uses that in Flagler as well, and they also reserved a bunch of the rock. So the one quarry, which I believe is in Flagler, I'm looking at Stuart if he. St. Augustine, yeah. So that's a limited supply as well, but it's also very expensive to haul that. And it's money that you're gonna have to take the rock back out once you build your seawall. So what do you do with, you know, tons of coquina rock once the storm is gone? So that's one of the things that, to me, I'll use white surf as an example, that I would like to see FDEP give on. When they rebuild their wall, allow them to keep the coquina rock as a secondary wall. It's natural stone, as a secondary wall behind. You know, they're gonna fill in with sand in front of it, between the seawall and the rock, but leave it. And then if their seawall fails, hey, they're double protected. You know, I've seen some seawalls that did not fail down, I don't know if it was Wilbur or Ponce, but there was a condo that had rock on the outside. Is that Ponce?
Yeah, it's Ponce.
That has rock on the outside of their seawall, and they didn't have any damage. But if we could allow them to leave it and use it versus, right now, we've even talked about the broken up concrete. They won't allow you to break up your concrete and place it. They're allowing you to temporarily place it at the toe of the dune, but you can't leave it. When you build your permanent seawall, all that debris has to come back out. So,
Can we add that on too? That's one of the things that I've been getting a lot of questions on, and at this time, AT&T, is no one's coming to get it, but they're asking a lot of questions about who's gonna clean up my debris.
yes, so,
Can we fit that? I don't think we specify that in here.
well, that's gonna be pretty clear in terms of its private property debris. And so the other night at the meeting,
Was that question brought up? at the
that
meeting?
question was asked, and before the meeting started, I said, you know, I know there's gonna be some questions tonight where you're not gonna like the answers. And when that question was asked, I said, this is one of those questions where you're not gonna like the answer, but I'm trying to be as truthful as I can. Once if that's your property, it's your property. And you're gonna be responsible for cleaning it up. And FEMA's not gonna come in, the county's not gonna come pull it off the beach for you, the state's not going to at this time.
Will we run into an issue at all where we did put the Tiger Dam and that, I know we left some of it with the bags, but is that gonna be an issue if somebody wants to clean up their property, if they do, if they're willing to pay for it, getting behind that Tiger Dam?
No, it's my understanding that I haven't gone, because they just finished today, to see the final thing, but what I was told was they were gonna leave a section of trap bags that they'll have a, like, forklift type of equipment there that can set those aside rather easily, so that the equipment then can drive through that
And pick up.
that trap bag gate and go behind the dam. That's why it was placed out further from, the edge of the erosion, so that they can get behind and work.
Wow,
So-
I'd hate to have anything dropped on those Tiger Dams, though, when they're removed.
Quite a leak.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Kurt,
Yes.
you mentioned Flagler Corps of Engineers, working with Flagler. Are we getting equal access to the Corps of Engineers? I haven't heard anything about the
No.
Corps of Engineers being here in
So what
Volusia.
can I met with Kevin Guthrie, who is the head of the emergency management, and Flagler is a engineered beach. And the Army Corps of Engineers will only do renourishment, rebuild, or anything on an engineered beach. Volusia County does not have an engineer. We're a non-engineered beach. What we're trying to get the answer to is, how do you become an engineered beach? So Army Corps of Engineer will not be coming to do any work in
Wow.
Volusia County. And we verified that a couple of different times.
Yes.
This is not something for this letter, but I think it would be something to send to the property owners. Could the staff actually look a little bit more in depth to the spec of the sand, both sands, and the cost, and how best to get the best cost?
We can, but I can tell you what DEP is saying is, and I know this because Stuart tried with some of our sand that we wanted to use at a park. You take a baggie, like a Ziploc baggie, of the sand to the FDEP rep, and they will examine it and make a determination on that sand. So there is no written standard anywhere. They're just looking at it and making a determination. So first of all, they are making exceptions because they're allowing clean sand
what I mean.
rather than beach compatible, but it's a case-by-case basis.
That's what I meant, the two types of sand, the spec sand and clean sand, and see if you can get the best definition you have of each one, and how to get the best cost.
I can try, but right now it's literally case by case. You have to take your sand to DEP, and that's what we're telling people that have asked, at least me, is take your baggie of sand to DEP, 440 South Beach Street, and have them look at it.
So we took some sand there, or?
Well, actually, Stuart tried Thursday night when they were already here, and I'm gonna, did they finally approve it? Oh, originally it was the state said, get the county to approve it, and then the county looked at it and said, get the state to approve it, but apparently they have, after the fact, approved it, so.
Where did you get that? Where is the source of that sand, Stuart?
It was a local supplier. It was a local supplier.
Okay.
And you have a rough idea of the cost of that sand?
Not at this time.
That's what I'm saying, could
It's a
you,
very small quantity that we needed. We were using it for Fenari Park. So it's a very small quantity, and I think that's gonna be one of the issues. Are you buying, 100 truckloads or a couple?
saying, rather than each property owner having to do all this work themselves, I think the city could save a lot just by looking into it a little more, and how to get it approved, and how to get the best price, and what the price maybe should be.
We also need to be careful, and I'll again look to the attorney on this, of recommending any one vendor
No, you don't have to even talk about a vendor, and just say, this is the kind of price, we think you should be paying, and.
They still have to know where to go to get
Madam
it.
Mayor,
Yes.
you know, the commissioners all have great questions, but I think we're getting into it way, way too deep. The purpose of this meeting is to get a consensus of what to assist staff in formulating a letter that we're all going to go by whenever either we make phone calls or if people call us. So getting into the cost of this or recommending that, this is not the purpose of this meeting. This meeting's here to make suggestions to the legislators in county, state, and federal government levels that we're all on the same page. That's my opinion.
All right.
So let's get out of the weeds then.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So the next thing that we're being asked all the time is about beach renourishment or replenishment. So the good news, we were talking about this a little bit before the meeting, the good news is the beach is starting to replenish itself. So there was a shipwreck in a stretch of the beach that was basically uncovered, and as of yesterday, it's about a foot under sand. So sand is coming back up on the beaches. This is down by the Tiger Dam area. But we're still nowhere near the 6 feet we lost. And the dunes themselves are not going to be rebuilt, certainly in a quick fashion. I have been told that the county is looking at beach renourishment. We talked about it before. It's a big project. Normally, it's a federally funded project, but this may be one of the things that the state would be willing to do. The county, it's a county beach project. It's a county beach. So we can just advocate to the county that we support it. And ask the state to support it as well. We are not, as the mayor alluded to earlier, we are not an engineered beach. So I do not expect the Army Corps of engineers to be coming in to do a project, especially anytime soon. Hurricane Sandy went through in 2012 or 14 in New Jersey and New York. They have an Army Corps of Engineer project that is still in the comment phase. Supposedly $52 billion that the Army Corps is going to do up there, but it's still in the comment phase. So if anything's going to happen in a timely fashion, it's going to have to be more localized, and I think that would be state funding. But the state opens itself up to, okay, Volusia got hit this time, plus 3 other counties on the West Coast. But, okay, when it's Miami next, are they going to be, having to do the whole, what about the Keys every time they get hit? Doing a beach renourishment project down there. So
Kurt, who did we hear only does 6 projects a year? Was that the federal or was that?
that's Army Corps of Engineers. So it's a
Even-
three-year cycle for applications, and they only approve 6 a year, and that's nationwide. So,
And we've stressed to each one of them, and this is what our residents are saying us too, and we understand it better than anyone else. Tourism is our industry here. A lot of the condos rent out their units, a lot of all the hotels. People come here for the beach. If we don't have the beach, people are not gonna come. And then that's a snowball effect. I stopped in Portofino the other day, and George told me how slow it was because no one's coming. And this is, just beginning right now. I can imagine, when we get into the January, February, March, when our snowbirds normally come, and they don't come because of no beach. So we fully understand how important this is. Is there anything else on the renourishment? I think this is a very, very important one. I think the DEP, no matter what we do, will fully support this because right now there is not much beach there for the turtles. There's no dunes there for them to have their nest. So that's what needs to be done to even get that environment back so they do come there. Any other questions, or what else can we talk about on the beach renourishment project? Any questions?
Well, I think the point that you mentioned about the turtles are gonna take away even more of the beach that's available. So there're gonna be less and less beach available to the people because they block off the turtle nest areas.
So, I want to go back to the purpose of this too. To Vice Mayor's point, we're trying to gather bullet points and what we're going to present on, but this is a workshop too. Again, we can't talk unless we're in a session like this. So, I am willing to expand a little bit on any of these so we get our feelings, how we feel, what we're hearing from our residents. So is there anything else that the residents have said, that we can answer their questions accordingly?
Well, we don't have any kind of time frame from the county, right, in regard to beach renourishment?
None.
So, I mean, that's the general category of what people want to know is, when are we going to get the beach back? And,
Well, the other question I'm getting is, a lot, is when are the accesses gonna be to the beach? And most of those are county or individual condo access points, right?
So are you talking that the drive-in ones like Florida Shores, or are you talking the easement walkovers?
No, the walkovers,
The walkovers, okay.
to the beach.
I think they're equally, we found out some are county, some are city, and some are the individual condos.
Yes, there's a combination up and down our coast, in the shores at least, that are, some are county-owned, some are city-owned, some are private, some are privately owned but deeded access to the public. But a lot of those repairs are going to be pending the seawall repair. I'll use St. Kitts as an example. We had a dune walk over there, but they're talking about building a seawall. Well, if they build a seawall, we may want to do something armored, because we would now be eligible to do armoring as well. So that those access points are going to take some time. I have asked staff to look at if there are a couple where we could do something temporary. The problem is that with the damage that was done to most of them, which is basically they're 100% gone, that it requires full DEP permitting to do those. So at that point, you might as well go ahead and do your full restoration project rather than a temporary solution. I mean, my thought was if we could get permission to have something that was, say, temporarily not ADA compliant, meaning a ramp, and just do ADA compliant steps. Simple step construction versus the fancy ramps and all of that, getting access to the majority of our community, but you have to go through the DEP permitting process, from what I've been told. So that's a hurdle in and of itself in providing access, at least from city walkovers.
So, I'm sorry, Kurt, go ahead and finish.
I was gonna say, the other thing is we have to walk through the FEMA process. So we're trying and waiting to hear what FEMA is gonna do, because we can get reimbursed for whatever insurance doesn't pay us on our on the walkovers. But there's questions right now because they're being treated as two separate incidents. And we'll have to show what was damaged under Ian and then show what was damaged under Nicole. And then there's a third step to that for us is if we decide to armor it, using the St. Kitts example again, if they build a seawall, it makes sense for us to either tell them to build their seawall 12 foot further up and we'll pay for it, or we build a seawall off of their seawall and harden it. But now that takes your project with FEMA from just a standard restoration to original state to what they call mitigation project. And that changes the whole standard. Now their mitigation team has to come out and approve your plans, and they'll pay the 75% of it, and the state pays 12.5%, so it's worth going through that process. It's just a process.
Well, Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read a number of places where Nicole is not covered by FEMA because it wasn't declared a national emergency.
At this time, to use the mayor's phrase, it is not, but we're expecting it to be declared.
One of the holdouts was Broward County.
It's my understanding, according to the county officials, that Broward was the slowdown in the state being able to make the request because they hadn't reported their damage numbers timely. So I believe that has been done, and I believe the governor has issued the request. So we're just waiting now for the federal folks to make the declaration.
So they can actually do it in retrospect?
Yes, if the federal declaration happens, then yes. But it causes problems for us because we can only restore by each storm right now. So we're hoping that, we're hoping Nicole gets declared and they're gonna say these are close enough events that we're going to treat it either as all Ian damage or all Nicole damage and handle it in one rather than, but FEMA is funny that way. Same thing with your insurance, like your homeowner's insurance. Some of the folks, if they got damaged during Ian and re-damaged during Nicole, it's 2 separate claims. And I can tell you the reason you're gonna have a hard time fighting that one is because they're both 2 deductibles. So,
About the money.
it's all about the money, and so those are the things that, we want to get access as quickly as we can and restore Life is Better Here as quickly as we can, but unless we just pay for it out of pocket and skip the FEMA process, which I don't suggest we do, it's gonna take some time as we work through that process.
And Kurt, we had one gentleman that came in that talked to us. What condo was he from? So we came up.
Kids.
No, it wasn't St. Kitts.
St. Martin's? Are you talking about the folks from St. Martin's?
No, remember the gentleman that came in and just showed up and we did talk to him? His name was Tom.
Yes.
Oh, not at the city council meeting, okay.
Yeah, oh no, yeah, not here, it was another one. Anyway, the point was that he was showing us what they'd like to do for a seawall, and Kurt was talking about it would make sense, but we have to see, we have to put that out for a bid when we get an engineer, is that correct?
Yeah.
But wouldn't it make sense that we would tie in, which we've talked to so many, I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I know, yeah, Mr. Baker.
Yes, okay, Tom, all right, so anyway, so is that what we're gonna do going forward with everyone? Or-
So each one is gonna be a case-by-case example. So one of the things that, and we'll have to look at, continuing with the St. Kitts example, we own the property right now. But it's possible that they say, look, we wanna protect our building, we wanna go north and cover your park. We might say, maybe we'll do an agreement with them where we give them the land, but in an agreement so that they can build the seawall on their property because we gave them the land. But as part of that agreement, we continue to maintain the park and the stairs that would be public access there. They own the seawall that covers our 12-foot or so. It's a very narrow strip of land. But right now, it'd be on us to build our seawall and them, those things. But, or maybe we just say, okay, let's talk about the cost for extending it. We come to an agreement and we pay X percentage of the seawall, but it's extended onto our property. But FEMA's gonna have that's where it gets confusing, is if we're doing those type of things with that, FEMA's gonna say, well, you didn't bid that. So FEMA wants us to follow, with some exceptions, federal purchasing guidelines, which are way stricter than city purchasing guidelines.
So in other words, some of these are not gonna be open anytime soon. And as far as the ramps, drive-on ramps, every one of those in the shores is owned by the county. So
Every drive-on ramp is owned by the
Okay, all right, okay, and that's up to them in their time frame. when they-
Yeah, Kurt, as far as the dollar damages estimates from the county, almost all of it is Nicole. Total is like 340 million, and then maybe 30 million of that is Ian. So that's their damage estimates.
I've heard upwards of 850
Anybody can guess that. I'm just saying, this is what the county,
Yeah, and this was a county number at one point of upwards of 850 between the two storms. So,
well, now it's 340, as of a few days ago, yes.
And I'm sorry, why were you bringing that up? Does that mean for federal assistance or what?
No, that means that's what the county estimates the damage of. And most of it's, based on their estimates, most of it's Nicole.
Okay, anything else on the renourishment before we move on to the contiguous seawall? Okay, Kurt, do you want to go over that?
yes, so there's been talk, even at our last council meeting, about the concept of a either citywide or countywide contiguous seawall. I actually think this is a neat concept. Presents a lot of dilemmas on funding and the possibilities of things like special assessment districts or municipal service taxing unit, I think is what it's called. Are you shaking your head? Yes. That you can create that determines who pays into it for the wall, and then you can borrow the money in forms of bonds, pledging that revenue over 20 or 30 years type of thing. So, the question then becomes, are, say, the properties, the Oceans buildings, their seawalls were fine. Would they want to have a contiguous seawall built in front of them? Would the county participate in that discussion and be willing to give up part of the beach? Because there usually has to be a public component to something like that, which would probably be in a small walking or bike path. So it's an interesting concept to have a hardened beach from one end to the other, whether it's a city or just the county, but not going to be cheap. It has been done in some places. Talked about Virginia Beach, I believe, at one of the last meetings. They did 55 blocks of contiguous seawall. 40 of that was in front of hotels, multi-family type locations, condos, but they were also condo with retail on the first floor, but they had a lot of space to work with. They built a bike path with a landscaped buffer or a walking path that was actually on the seawall that led down to the beach. Now, it's beautiful, it's lit up, it is a beautiful project, Army Corps of Engineer project. They were an engineered beach. Are they close to DC? Did Congressman vacation in Virginia Beach? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's how they got it done. But does the council want to support an idea or at least look into the concept?
Now, excuse me for
Yeah, go
interrupting.
ahead.
Now, on the way in, I believe I heard that Volusia County beaches are not engineered. So Army Corps of Engineers
Correct.
will not come and do any work here.
Correct.
So if they won't, if that's something we wanted to pursue, who would actually do that work?
It would most likely have to be a county application, because it is a county beach. And it would have to be built, from my understanding, for the most part, on the beach property and in front of those existing seawalls. That's the only way it would make it contiguous, because otherwise you're going to have, and there's this fancy formula, and one of the engineers from the county tried to explain it to me, and Chief Fowler, the other night, and it's about this angle between the coastal conservation line and the mean high water line, and the angle determines how high your seawall can go and how far back and forward from this and that.
Now, would there be any danger of losing driving on the beach because of that? Because it's going to take
Yes.
more space?
Yes. So, and you run that risk as well with if you had a federally funded beach renourishment program as well. I don't know if that would be, if the state would step in, but I'm assuming if the state's going to say, we're going to allow you to put a seawall and put sand up on the beach, you're not going to drive on it.
And Kurt, that it would greatly, I mean, we don't have, people told me years ago, we had this wide beach. It's gotten smaller and smaller. So if we had this other seawall, wouldn't that cut into the amount of beach that we have even more so?
Absolutely, unless you tie that into a beach renourishment and they extend the beach. I mean, if China can build whole islands, we can extend our beach. You know.
Kurt, 2 points on this. Number one, the people, you touched on the point, people who seawall is fine, would not really want to spend additional money for what they consider unnecessary. The other thing,
And I'm going to ask just a talking point here. We talked about beach driving. So if we went to the oceans, and because we get complaints about the loud cars and the trucks tearing up my beach and stuff, if you're willing to, over the next 30 years, pay into a bond that now you're going to have people walking and biking in front of your condo, but you're not going to have the loud vehicles on the beach and all the trash that comes with the vehicles, you might get people on board.
yeah, but then when you go to the second point, the gentleman who introduced that thought said he got a price of $134 million to do the 7 miles. And where are you going to get $134 million?
That's part of the question, is funding.
I think that's going to be a tough sell, especially for people who already have a hardened seawall that stood the last 2 hurricanes.
Yeah, but somebody else said to me, and I'm sorry, and I'll let you go through this. Somebody else said to me that lived in one of the oceans is, it didn't fail this time, but maybe it would next time. I would be willing to look to have double safety, or seawall that lasts, and another one that we know that we're doubly covered. And go ahead, Commissioner Economos, go ahead.
Now, I would imagine Volusia County would have something to say about this, because I believe they get a lot of revenue from driving on the beach.
Yes.
Now, does Volusia County get all of that revenue, if you know, or does the state get some of it too? Do we know how much revenue they get per year generally?
I believe it's a couple $1 million in tolls. It's not
That's it. I thought it would be more than that.
It's,
Okay.
it's not, I was surprised the last time I heard the number. It is not, and I can verify that number, but.
Yeah, if you can look it up, but when you think
it's
about it, it's only
surprisingly low.
Right.
$25 a year for Volusia County residents
Right,
and $100
right.
for not, that probably makes sense.
Yeah, I thought that would have been a much higher number, but.
And one of the things that would probably happen to address that, one, you'd have to have off-beach parking. And what that would look like to still provide, that would probably be one of the big drivers of implementing off-beach parking would be that. But I can tell you what would come with that would be parking fees. So if you go down to Miami or South Beach or anything like that, when you park, okay.
Well, that's the other issue is, we don't have a lot of parks here for basically the majority of people that come to our beaches obviously are driving on the beach. So we have some parks, but we don't have, I don't think, enough to accommodate as many people that normally would come here.
We do not right now, and that was the first time I mentioned that to the county. Their comment to me was, where are you putting the cars?
Right.
And the only other two we have is Andronopolis and Beachcomber, and what is there, 25 spots at each?
Minimal at each
Minimal,
location,
right.
yeah. There would have to be some kind of joint plan with that of where are we putting the cars. Now, having said that, one of the things that happened during COVID was our hotels were busier because people were staying at the hotel and parking at the hotel. And so that helped the hotels. So part of that discussion is, if you're coming here for the weekend, stay at the hotel.
That's a good.
And drive up businesses, which means if you're staying at a hotel, you're more likely to be going out to a restaurant.
Good point.
So there's talking points both ways on that. And that's not something that's happening, in my opinion, in even probably a serious discussion in the next 3 to 6 months. You'd have to have somebody spearheading that and pushing that. I love the concept. I think it'd be very neat to have, because we don't have, as a city, we don't have other than A1A, we don't have a good walking path from one end of the city to the other than the natural beach. But there's not a center path here, but
Okay, anything else
The
on the,
continuous seawall doesn't have anything to do with this letter we're trying to, right?
It's on here, yes.
Well, it's on here, and it's one of those things that, you know, it may not be, it's not a talking point. We did talk with the Representative Leak about the concept, and the one thing he, as we were wrapping up, he did say, this is not the first time I'm hearing any of these. Maybe some bullet points about the bullet point, but, so somebody has already talked to him about the concept of that as well, so doesn't mean the state isn't open to the idea, but I don't think that's gonna happen in the next legislative session. So I don't think that needs to be in that letter, but we have a large group in the community that is, I believe, trying to come together and spearhead something along this idea anyways.
Yeah, I think the 134 million is the big stumbling block, so if you can get around that, I think there are a lot of other good points, like you mentioned, that would be selling points.
how much do you think a standalone seawall is gonna cost the condos?
You know, I'm hearing anything from $500,000 to $3 million, and a lot of it depends on where and how high and how much you decide you want it. So the side returns are a big deal for a lot of folks. So a lot of the other ones, the original ones, were maybe 10, 12 feet back. Well, some of them are now talking, we want to go past the edge of our building, and, you know, so that might be 20, 30 feet. I did ask one contractor for a 12-foot high, 10-foot back on each side. He said that's 10 grand a side for every 10 foot. So you're looking at $1,000 a foot for a return, which to me, an extra 20,000 split over how many condo units to go an extra 10 feet back, money well spent. I'm not an engineer.
Is
So
that to keep the side intrusion?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So even for a contiguous seawall, you know, which is gonna be a lot of money, but the good part of that is we don't want what happened, and we see it up and down the beach. One of the seawalls failed, and it was connected to the next seawall, so, you know, that would not happen. And wasn't that one of the main reasons for your meeting? Meet your neighbor, get the same.
Absolutely,
Walk into your ear, talk about.
Talk with your
doing something
neighbor,
joint.
share information, share engineers, share plans about how you're gonna harden everything around you. So that
And were
was,
they pretty open to that?
absolutely. And they all did at the very end. I asked them to turn and talk, and if you hadn't met your neighbor, turn and talk to them. And they did. I did try and stop the crowd and ask a question at that point. Boy, they were done. After 2 hours, they were done.
But perhaps too, if a structural engineer is gonna come out or a contractor, if you're already there and the material's there, would they not save money, you would think, in the long run?
Oh, absolutely. Commissioner Bryan and I have been talking about that concept. So if you have 3 condos in a row, it doesn't make sense to pay 3 separate engineers to design 3 separate seawalls. It's just about the length at that point and where you put the returns for each individual one. So your typical design, if it's DEP approved, you can use that same design. It might be 10 foot longer or 100 foot longer, maybe with additional tiebacks, but it really doesn't make sense to pay, you know, I said 120 some properties to have 120 different engineering contracts. The engineers will love it. And the contractors will love it because, I just drew a blank on the term.
Fine, no.
When contractors start, they have it's not staging, but there's a term in the beginning where it's like a setup fee, everything, and they're gonna charge, if you have one contract for 3 buildings, there's gonna be 1 setup fee versus 3 setup fees. You know, so there's a definite benefit. The hindrance there of getting them to work together is if you have 3 condos in a row, and condos A and C have their funding and everything and their ducks in a row, but condo B is that condo that, you know, they're all fighting and everything else.
Doesn't have the reserves.
Doesn't have the reserves, and they're waiting, you know, on loans and other stuff. That's where you run into the problems. But, you know, hey, if they can all work together, that makes sense to me. And I think that's where the contiguous seawall idea first came from, was one, observations of where damage did not occur. And that was where you had a flat seawall, like the oceans. They were all the same distance, you know, all connected together. They're tall, they're heavily armored. And where we saw it, the damage was where they were not. Or they were the old seawalls with palm trees.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So with that thought in mind, and to close that particular issue, how about we, as a commission, allow the staff to incorporate some kind of language that we endorse or encourage Florida Department of Environmental Protection to relax their standards and restrictions to accommodate these concepts when several properties potentially could get together, enjoy economies of scale, and make one strong seawall as opposed to three independent ones. Something along that line.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on the seawalls before we move on to the Senate bill?
I just want to add, under that, that's a great point, but I'd like to add that possibly allow someone, if they're under the current regulations, if their neighbors are out further than them on both sides, it only makes sense to allow them to go out and equal their neighbors, so you have that contiguous seawall. I don't know how I'll word that, but,
That's for the speaker, okay. You want to break it.
So what, we'd be asking the legislature to ask DEP to,
yes.
Yeah.
well, if we want to ask for that kind of stuff, I think the turtle thing, to stop construction in May would be a major issue. So I think, if we're going to be specific, that's one thing that we should ask to be relaxed.
The rest of the commission agree?
Yep, I agree. Okay, and, you know, far back, when we had Tom Wright here, I think for my coffee with the mayor in October, we were already talking about Senate Bill 4D, about what a strain that it was gonna put on some of the condos that didn't have a lot of reserves and that it needed to be tied up. So even more so, whatever reserves condos have been spent on trying to get temporary measures or planning for a seawall. So Kurt, do you wanna expand on that a little bit more, we'll talk to Tom Leak about?
Yeah, on the deadline for the funding for that bill is, I believe, December of 2024. With insurance premiums skyrocketing, with the seawall damage, I would like to request that they just blanket condominiums in Volusia County. And without, I don't know how to say ones that are damaged by that, if they just say condominiums in the 4 impacted counties and say that they get another 2 years or 5 years or some type of extension on that. And they do single out counties that way. That's how the emergency final orders for the seawalls. One thing I didn't send out just as we're talking about this, every single property in Volusia County, other than the park at Ponce Inlet and the south side of the jetty, is now declared vulnerable and eligible to build a seawall. That came out last Thursday. So that whole modeling that you had to do and prove that you were vulnerable, anybody, they just said Volusia County, from this marker to this marker and this marker to this marker, is eligible or is vulnerable, which automatically makes you eligible. They removed, if it was a non-conforming thing, doesn't matter, you can still build it back. They've allowed for additional armoring, so DEP has bent a lot. And that was signed not by the governor, but by the Sean Hamilton of DEP, the secretary. So they have bent a lot, just not on the sand. So
Do they bend under pressure from the governor, or do you know?
I have a feeling it's not just the governor. From my conversations with like Senator Wright and Representative Leak, they have all been putting pressure on that department to be reasonable.
Kurt, for our residents and for those who don't know, could you explain what Senate Bill 4D is?
Yes, so Senate Bill 4D requires each condominium or condotel, anything that has filed condominium paperwork with the state, I believe it's 3 stories or higher, to have a structural engineer come in and do phase 1. Phase 1 determines a phase 2 inspection, but basically to come in and assess what building needs are. Do you need a new roof in 5 years? Do you have spalling that needs to be addressed? Do you
I think it was
have
7 areas.
Yeah, there's like 7 main points of that, and not a bad thing to say, okay, we're gonna force the condominiums to look at what is wrong with them and address those points. The kicker of the bill is they had till December 2024, whatever that engineer says is the funding requirement, to fund it. And
Separate reserve.
separate reserves from their existing reserves. Now, they could take from their existing reserves and move it over. So if they had money set aside to redo the tile and the wallpaper, whatever in their common area, they can move that over to this asset fund, I'll call it. But that's a very short time frame, and with assessments already going out for seawalls, and then some of the folks are talking about special assessments for the insurance bill because they didn't have it in their budget, depending on when their year is. So if that can be delayed, I believe the bill is a good idea so that we don't have another Surfside. But the financial impact right now to our community is just devastating.
Is this law right now?
Yes.
This is law right now.
And this was a special.
This was at the end of the last full session. They did a special session and addressed the condos. And even after that, a couple of the representatives and their aides told me they knew there were problems with the bill, but they would be addressing those at the next session. So I'm proposing to do an ask that Volusia County, and I'm only singling out Volusia because we're at, be given a X number of year extension on that funding requirement. And I'll look to council to give me a consensus on what you feel is a reasonable time frame. And I can't tell you what that dollar amount is because it's going to be different for every condominium depending on how much they have in reserves, how much work they have done or already have planned and already funded, and how they're going to do that. I'm hoping that they're not going to have to, if they're taking out loans for the seawall, that they're not going to have to go take out loans to fund the reserves as well. So a delay in that. One of the other things I thought about is even if we ask for a 2-year delay, but then partial implementation, if it's, if this engineer says, okay, you should have an additional $5 million in reserves, can we do 20% this year, 20% for a total of 40% the next year, another 20% to get to 60, over the next 5 years as a rolling type of escalation.
And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking 3 years to have it complete on top of what we already have.
Okay, so December 2027.
Right. But I do like that staggered as well. Have X amount in. I don't know what that looks like, but I think 2027 is a very fair for people to have that additional, especially what's going on now. But we're open to anyone else. Anyone else have anything besides 3 years to make it 2027?
I mean, that's 5 years from this month, so.
And then, again, the staggered based on what the engineer found. Another thing I'm going to put on my advocacy hat, we have to urge our residents, these are elected officials that we're reaching out to that we want to speak on our behalf. nothing is more important than getting letter writing going to, on these specific issues, and especially on this 4D, because that really affects their pocketbook.
Absolutely.
We have to start to get them to write letters, and we certainly can be instrumental in supplying them if they need it with, I know it's public knowledge that you can get any of these emails, but they need to start writing letters. Okay, anything else on 4D? Okay, so circling back, Becky, I would like your opinion. Okay, so one of the things, we started out with this ordinance that we have here. I'm sure everyone knows there is a lot of eyes, or some eyes, on this council, on this commission, on what goes on, what happens. Becky, can you tell us what we did incorrectly last Wednesday that someone felt it was a sunshine violation? Did we call it the wrong kind of meeting? Tell us what we did wrong so that doesn't happen again.
Okay, and I won't describe it as doing anything wrong.
Okay.
But my recommendation in the future is when you have these big gatherings, even if 99% of it is staff presentation, that you call it a city commission meeting.
A
So
workshop
that
or-
everybody, you can call it whatever you want, but it's got to be something that, everybody, that they would expect everybody to be here. And then you'd be free to say whatever you wanted or not, whatever, And I know that the question about, and I want to emphasize again, I don't think staff did anything wrong. I would have, made some suggestions, and which I did, but I did it at the last minute, once I heard of the stuff. But I would suggest that if we have a situation where we think literally thousands of people might come out, and that might happen, not to limit the number of people. You could put the word out, we're expecting thousands of people. You might be able to see and hear it better if you stayed at home and watched your TV. But that's something that is fundamental to the Sunshine Law, that they are public meetings. It's not public meaning that 5 people from each condo can go.
Okay, so that was one of the things too, limiting it from 2. And even though the intent was the city manager was not going to limit it.
No, I know, but to say it is problematic. And, the Daytona Beach Shores is extremely blessed with this humongous building. As long as you can get audio upstairs, across the way, in the hallway, whatever the fire code allows as far as occupancy. If you go over the fire occupancy, then people can stand outside, and I suggest that you have speakers outside. And I've seen this done in other cities who are not blessed with something this big. And they haven't had thousands of people, but they've had hundreds, and they really couldn't accommodate them. But they had a speaker system set outside, and what I'm thinking about is it happened to be raining that night, which was a shame, but they were on TV also.
Okay.
So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that feedback, appreciate that. So again, circling back on the ordinance right there, I would like a consensus that the majority of the, when people are reaching out, whether elected officials or not, come to me as the spokesperson for the commission. One exception that I would like to make, and we can talk about this a little bit more, Councilman Bryan, or Commissioner Bryan, I know you're doing a lot of work on the continuous seawall, and there are people that are reaching out to you. So Becky, give us some direction how, most of the communication would go through me, but we would allow Commissioner Bryan to do some fact-finding on seawall. Can you help us with that?
And it is important when someone, under the Sunshine Law, as strange as it may sound, if the city commission appoints one person to actually accomplish something, that person becomes for purposes of the Sunshine Law, when they do things, it has to be at a meeting, which doesn't make sense. The exception for that is what they call fact-finding. And that's what the case law calls it. And I think this would lend itself very well for fact-finding. If Commissioner Bryan were to, do detailed research, whatever is needed in order to come back to the entire commission and share his fact-finding, then that would work well. I mean, now, if we were to assign him to make decisions, that basically hamstrings him, he can't do anything.
I don't want to be assigned to make decisions. But I'd make it pretty clear to everybody I talk to or write to, that it's my opinion, it's not the opinion of the city. So I think that solves that issue.
Sure, but I think what the city commission right now is asking you to be the one, to be the fact finder as to this extremely complex issue.
Commissioner, what I'm worried about is when, and I don't know this for a fact, but I know you went to the one meeting that was at Demucci.
Yeah.
I can ask you, did you have your shirt on that said Commissioner?
No, I didn't have a shirt on. They knew I was a commissioner.
Okay, all right, but don't you always, I've seen you pass out cards as well,
Yeah.
to people. So when you're doing that, the perception is you're representing.
Yeah, but like I said, if I'm writing anything to people, I actually put it right in the writing. These are my opinion and
All right, but when you pass out your card, do you say, this is my opinion, and still pass out the card?
I will. I'll make it, sometimes.
I don't know if you, Becky, can you do both? Can you say, I'm the commissioner, but this is my opinion?
If you're just handing out a
you
card,
can.
not even offering it.
And if we're going to be asking him to do fact-finding for this, I think it would be appropriate for him to be able to say, I've been authorized by the city commission to do fact-finding on this,
The seawall.
on the seawall.
When people ask me, do you have a business card? Do you have a card? When I give them a card, I'm not saying anything other than giving them the card. Do I have to say anything? That's not my opinion, the card, that's a fact.
No.
Okay. Okay.
No.
No, but I mean, it was brought up that at the time you pass out the card, that implied that.
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're passing out the card
And
and
saying, and I feel like we should have a seawall, or I feel, if you're talking about.
you're expressing an opinion.
But if somebody knows who you are and they come up and ask for a card,
Madam Mayor,
that's,
let's just, here's my opinion. If you're at Red Lobster, if you're at a coffee shop and you run by somebody and you say, well, it's my opinion, that's all well and dandy, but if you're specifically going to attend some kind of presentation and you're handing out business cards, whether you have your personal opinion or not, most people will perceive that that opinion is authored or sponsored by the commission. And I personally don't want that to be said. I don't mind giving my personal opinion when it's requested, but, we have to be careful here.
That's
because
what I'm very worried about.
It's a small town.
And I want to go back to, we already know all eyes are on us, looking to see what we're doing. So that's why I want to make sure we are crystal clear in what we're doing. So again, I got a conversation the other day with the city manager. So if I'm saying, yes, I'm really in favor of beach nourishment, and I think they should do that, and I think this would work, and I have my shirt on that says mayor, people are assuming that I'm talking for the city, that I'm not talking. I own a condo on the beach, so naturally, I would love to have beach renourishment to bring that back. But I'm not talking as Nancy Miller that owns a condo at that time. I'm talking as Nancy Miller, the mayor, and representing the city thoughts. So that's, again, I'm sorry if I'm beating this to death, but again, because of that meeting last week, what happened, I want to make crystal clear what we're doing, something that is not a sunshine violation.
well, would that have been okay if it was announced and formally,
Oh, if it were a city commission meeting,
We announced it.
I would hope
No, I
they
mean-
would be here.
No, it
what
wasn't-
I
it
mean
wasn't
is if
publicly
it's
noticed.
published in the paper and so forth.
You don't even need to publish it in the paper.
Oh, you
It
know?
was, which way, can you confirm which way we announced it, city manager?
The last meeting?
Yes.
So one of the things that, and Becky and I have talked at length about this, and we've made some changes going forward, So we as a city, our charter says post it in a common place. We've always used the bulletin board at City Hall as the official notice. We put it on, some meetings are on the calendar, some are not. All meetings going forward will be on our website calendar. So those will be either on the agenda for the specific city council meetings, but we're going to be posting anything where we know council may be in attendance together. For example, I think most of us are going to the League of Cities dinner. We're going to add that to the calendar where you all may be in attendance so that it's publicly noticed that 2 or more members of the commission will be in attendance at this meeting.
Does it make it a public meeting?
No, it does not make it a public meeting.
It's giving public notice.
But
So
it is public notice.
Does not have any side talk.
And obviously, y'all are not gonna be sitting there talking about the seawall at the meeting. You better not. I mean, that will come before you. You need to talk about social things when you're
So-
together.
we posted that meeting on the bulletin board. It did not get posted to the website, and that's where the kind of, I'll call it the sticking point was, we don't have an official place, but we've always used the bulletin board, but going forward, we're making these changes. And if I have to do another meeting like that, it's just gonna be me as city manager. I can talk to anybody I want to as a group. I fall under sunshine, but not as strict as elected
But
officials.
I don't want that to happen in case, you know, I want people to know that we're there supporting what you're doing. So I want to do it the right way. And again, I've always talked about lessons learned. So Becky gave us some pointers of what we need to do next time. We'll take that into consideration and do that. So I guess what I'm asking for now, before we're writing up, do I have the consensus that I am the spokesperson for any officials that reach out to us, any meetings that are scheduled?
Yes.
Yes. And do we want to say that Richard is authorized to do research,
Fact-finding
fact-finding?
on the seawall?
I do.
Commissioner, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right, any questions or anything else you think we need? Go ahead.
Just one little clarification. I was sent a text by a staff member that I was slightly off on my beach toll number. It's about 6.7 million estimated beach toll revenue, not 2
Does that
million.
money happen to be in a special fund that we can pull from that fund to help with our beach?
Yeah, at the end of the day, 6.7 million isn't gonna go very far either. And I was asked today about the governor's 20 million that has been talked about. And, yes, we've been told by emergency management officials that it's probably gonna be split between the 4 counties that were impacted, so that leaves us about 5 million. And most likely, that'll be handled through the county, not through us. So how they divvy that up and use it, I'll try and stay in that loop. But I've already gotten wind of a meeting that supposedly happened yesterday that I was out of the loop on, so I'm gonna try and get back in that loop.
A county meeting?
A county staff discussion, I'll say.
So anything else, Becky, do you think we have to clarify, or I just want to make sure we're covered on everything?
I just wanted to make sure that there was a consensus of all 5 with regard to the divvying up of.
Do you want to go over that again, so Sherry has it for her?
Yes,
Okay.
I mean, you know, I think each person should say yes or no, they agree with the divvying up
Okay.
of responsibilities.
Commissioner Bryan?
Yeah, I had already said that. Now everybody else has.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I'm going to go up again, though.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I guess, do you need mine?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Okay, good, that's fine.
Okay, anything else? Because this is one of these rare opportunities that we do get to speak, talk about anything else that we want to talk about and not feel like we have a violation. Anything else outside of Ian or Nicole that we want to talk about?
Is that session supposed to last all week?
It's scheduled the 12th through the 16th, you know.
I
I would, yes, I would think it's gonna last the whole week. But But it all depends, you know, as I said before, Representative Leak said there already is language being crafted well in advance, but you've got to get the House and the Senate on the same page. So I'm expecting it to be a very long 5 days, so, or 4 days, 5 days.
Okay, so that, again, anyone that's asking you, what can we do? Anytime someone comes up to you and says anything about this item, you know, it would benefit you to write a letter. And I would address this one to Representative Leak, since he's going to be leading.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I'll also, I think Senator Wright, since he is officially our new senator.
And the 13 homes that will belong to Chase
Tremont, correct. And just wanted to add one more thing, if I could, for the mayor. You know, sorry for the short notice, but basically, in conversations with some of the representatives, because our next meeting was not until the 13th, where session the session would already be well in progress. I didn't want to wait, nor did the mayor want to wait to have this discussion and be trying to craft language in support of stuff that they're already moving on. And I want them to hear us before the session starts. So thank you for.
I don't think you have to apologize for that. That's what we signed up for, so.
Madam Mayor, the last thing is, will you, along with Kurt, draft a letter and send it to the governor, send it to Tom Wright, send it to Tom Leak, so that way they know clearly what we've discussed here today and what we've all agreed to?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Need a resolution, or do you think just a letter would be?
I think a letter, and basically we'll say that we held this meeting.
Okay, and this is the consensus of our commission?
Yes, and, you know, I'll work with the attorney as well on some of that language to make sure we're, you know, using the correct language for these items. But I think we have pretty good direction from the commission on how to craft that letter. But we'll try and get that out as quick as possible to each of you. And Becky, if we send a draft out to each of them, if they just send comments to me,
As long as you just take that, they can't vote.
right.
You know, and if maybe you missed something, or Sherry missed something, when they can remind you of things, but you're not bound by what they say,
Correct.
yeah,
I just-
that's fine.
Want to make sure that if I send it out, I always try and put don't reply all, but please don't reply all.
I would strongly recommend sending it to yourself with blind carbon copies to everybody. Makes it a lot easier to not hit.
That doesn't mean we don't know who it's going to.
Yeah.
Still.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank everyone for meeting tonight. Again, it was short notice, but we felt it was very, very important. You know, again, we know that eyes are on us watching everything we do. I don't want to have any violations. I don't want anything ever coming back to, we have a great commission here, and I want to keep that going forward. And with the help of Becky and Kurt, I'm sure we'll be able to do that. Just want to announce we will have our meeting on Tuesday night, the 13th at 6 p.m. And the next day at my coffee with the mayor, we are going to make a proclamation that it's Billy Wheeler Day. You know, so Billy only has a couple weeks left on her term. She has been a very big advocate for our city, a great help. So that, since we public notice that, any commissioner can come that wants to in attendance?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
So,
Sherry attends those and takes minutes of the coffee with the mayor.
okay, and we publicly announce those attorneys, so I think we're fine at that. But it would be a nice way to honor Billy. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to correct any possible misconception. I don't favor a continuous well, or I don't not favor it. I don't have enough information now about costs and a lot of things. I think it will be difficult to implement just because a lot of people, in any time in the near future, just because a lot of people already have seawalls that work. They want to put seawalls up that don't work. So tying them together may make some sense, but this long 5.5 mile seawall, I'm not advocating it, and I'm not saying it should never happen. That's basically.
One or the other. Yes, but please bring us back the information after you've done some research on it.
well, I'm not particularly researching the continuous seawall. What I'm trying to do is see, I'm working with 3 engineers that are residents.
Okay.
2 civil engineers and the other one's an environmental engineer.
Okay.
And we're trying to see what the design of seawalls that failed and seawalls that held, and see if there's anything to be gleaned from that.
Okay.
And there are some actual builders and developers that we're going to talk to, like Ed Peck and a guy by the name of Alan Green. That have
Fort Orange?
have built a lot of seawalls, and so that's pretty much where we're focused right now.
And will that be something you'll be able to come back and?
Yeah, we can make some kind of presentation. Maybe even one of the engineers would make the presentation to the council.
Okay. And that again, I try not, one of our previous council person who didn't like the idea of workshops. I'm not gonna have a workshop just to have one, but this is a very difficult time we're going through right now, and perhaps maybe in another 2 weeks, we will need another workshop to report that back.
Yeah, it could be a workshop, or they could even do it at a regular council meeting, yeah.
Well, the only thing is with the, we're only having one in December, and if we have some pertinent
That might be,
information.
that would probably be too soon.
Right, and I hate to wait till January if we have some really good information
Yeah.
that
Well-
you come across.
Well, it would be a value mainly to the property owners, so that they, because people are going out now and hiring engineers, and there's money being spent that maybe wouldn't have to be spent if they.
That's what I was a little bit worried about, were people jumping up too soon and they're just gonna get their standalone one, and somebody else is gonna have one that doesn't match, and we're gonna be in the same spot we were
I don't know
in.
that it has to match, but it's mainly a cost thing. They can save money by not reinventing the wheel. And if a lot of them go out for bids for the construction part of it. But in general, I think the big part of the cost in the past has been what I'll call gouging. They're taking advantage of the situation, and people are willing to pay whatever price they have to pay now for sand. I'm not sure what we can do about that, but.
That's what I was gonna say, right now, supply and demand, so. Okay, anything else from anyone? Okay, if not, thank you very much for being here this evening. The meeting's adjourned.